The Texas sun had painted the sky a flawless cobalt blue, calm and quiet. But in a small McDonald's tucked off a busy avenue, the air was thick with something else, something brewing just beneath the surface. Chuck Norris was enjoying a rare moment of peace. Still in jeans and a plain black tee, the legend had just wrapped a charity event for underprivileged children, one of the few things that could pull him off a set and into the real world. After hours of handshakes, laughter, and making kids feel seen, Chuck decided to indulge in something low-key. A burger, fries, and silence. He slid into a corner booth, shut off his phone, and let the atmosphere settle over him. The usual fast food chaos filled the room, orders being called out, ketchup packets torn open, kids squealing in the play area. True. But even in stillness, Chuck never really stopped watching. That's when he noticed the boy. Messy blonde hair, faded blue shirt, a broken toy car clutched so tightly it looked like it was the only thing he had left in the world. The boy didn't smile, didn't speak, just stared at Chuck. The boy's eyes flicked nervously to the man beside him, tall, clean-cut, wearing a suit that looked more Wall Street than Happy Meal. He was glued to his phone, jaw clenched, eyes sharp. Every move the boy made earned a cutting glance. Nothing loud, just loaded. It was a stare Chuck had seen before. Control, containment, concealed cruelty. You didn't need a badge to recognize evil. The boy squirmed, nervous energy bubbling beneath the surface. Then, unexpectedly, he slid off his chair, broken car in hand, and began walking toward Chuck's booth. The world seemed to slow, voices faded, and time bent around what was happening. Chuck gently set down his burger. The boy stopped beside him, trembling, his lips parted, his voice barely there. Chuck leaned closer, and whatever Ethan whispered, it hit Chuck like a roundhouse kick to the chest. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait. He reached into his pocket and, click, dialed 911. From across the room, Mr. Harris noticed. The moment Ethan left the table, the man's expression shifted. He stood, smoothed his suit, and began walking, measured, polite, and lethal. Chuck didn't move. He simply rose to his full height, placing himself between Ethan and the man. The air between them went electric. "Sorry about this," Harris said with a tight smile, his voice smooth as ice. "Ethan tends to get overly curious. I hope he hasn't been bothering you." Chuck didn't blink. "He's not the one who should be worried about bothering anyone," he replied, voice steady as steel. Behind Chuck, Ethan clung to his toy car like it was a lifeline. His small frame trembled, but his eyes, wide and pleading, stayed locked on the man in the suit. This wasn't just a child misbehaving. This was something deeper, darker. Chuck had seen battlefields. He'd walked into ambushes and come out the other side. But this required a different kind of strength, the kind that doesn't throw the first punch, but is always ready for the last. Chuck Norris didn't flinch. Sure way. His eyes stayed locked on Harris, unwavering, cool, calculated. Beneath that calm exterior, however, was a storm building fast, and Harris was walking straight into it. Years of confronting evil had honed Chuck's instincts into a weapon, and every fiber of his being was screaming the same message. This man is dangerous. Without breaking eye contact, Chuck offered a half smile. Too calm, too sharp. "Actually, he was just showing me his toy car," Chuck said, slow and even. "You better fix it. Right now." Harris paused, his mask cracking ever so slightly. He forced another courteous smirk, the kind that never touched the eyes. "Ah, yes, he's quite attached to it," he muttered, extending a hand toward Ethan. "Come on, Ethan. It's time to go." But the boy took a single step backward. "No words?" "Just retreat, subtle but seismic." He edged behind Chuck like a soldier ducking behind a shield. The temperature dropped. Harris' plastic smile faltered, replaced by a twitch of irritation. He tried to recover with a breath and a forced laugh. "Look, I appreciate you keeping him entertained, but we've got somewhere to be. Excuse us." Harris moved in. Chuck moved faster, a firm hand on Harris' shoulder, like a steel trap. "Justice waits for no one," Chuck said flatly. "And I think Ethan needs a minute." Said something about his car, thought we'd figure it out. Before Harris could argue, a waitress appeared, tray in hand. Her eyes flicked between the two men, sensing the rising tension. Everything okay over here? She asked, her tone tight. Chuck turned to her with a calm smile. It's fine. Could you grab Ethan a drink? Looks like he could use one. The waitress hesitated, then nodded, casting another wary glance at Harris before stepping away. As she did, Chuck subtly slipped out his phone and began typing a message, a single text, a single lifeline. He was calling in backup. Harris noticed. He stepped in, voice sharp now. I don't know what you think you're doing, he hissed, but this has gone far enough. Chuck didn't stop typing. I'm just trying to help a boy who looks like he needs someone to listen, he replied, eyes narrowing. And now, this is my business. For a moment, Harris froze, calculating. His veneer of control was crumbling fast. Then Ethan finally spoke. I don't want to go. Please, can I stay here? His voice was soft, shaking, but powerful enough to stop the world. Harris' face hardened. His eyes drilled into Chuck with ice-cold hostility. You need to walk away, he said, low and lethal. Chuck didn't blink. And not happening, he pressed send. Somewhere in the distance, the wheels of justice had just started turning. The noise of the restaurant returned in a distant blur, families laughing, trays clattering, but in Chuck's corner of the world, time stood still. Ethan clutched his broken toy car like it was his armor. Chuck knelt beside him again, voice gentle. You're safe now. You're safe now. Whatever you need to say, Chuck Norris is listening. The boy checked over his shoulder. Harris was still watching, seated again, phone in hand, muttering into it like he was coordinating something. Ethan's voice was barely audible. He did something bad. To my mom, everything changed. The words dropped like a bomb. Chuck stiffened, but his voice stayed calm. I got you, he said. We're not alone. Ethan gave a small nod, eyes shimmering with tears. But the fear didn't fade. If anything, it deepened because Harris had seen the exchange. He stood. Tension rippled through his tailored frame. Sorry to interrupt, he said, walking forward again, but Ethan and I are leaving. I'll have to teach him some manners. He reached out. Too fast. Chuck rose, faster, like a shadow lifting off the ground. He's still talking about his car, Chuck said, tone flat but final. I think he needs a few more minutes. That's very kind, Harris replied, jaw tight, but he's with me. We have an appointment. The kids need time to talk, Chuck said, and he stays. Now. Harris' mask shattered for half a second. Rage flickered in his eyes. But before he could lash out, the waitress returned, this time empty-handed, but with something hidden beneath her tray. She placed it on Chuck's table, a folded piece of paper, disguised as a napkin. Chuck opened it without missing a beat. The police are on their way. Relief washed through him, but only for a moment. The threat wasn't over. It was just cornered. Chuck turned to Ethan and smiled gently. Then he looked at Harris, eyes hardening. Why don't we all sit down for a minute, Chuck said. Oh, we're not in the Wild West. You don't get to act like a big man in a place full of families. Harris glared but slowly nodded, a snake coiled, waiting to strike. He returned to the table, muttering into his phone, his agitation growing by the second. Chuck could feel it rising, tension twisting tighter with every heartbeat. He glanced down at Ethan, then at the door. Tick-tock! The cavalry was coming. Officer Ramirez stood tall. Officer Vega crouched down beside Ethan, her voice low and gentle. Buddy, can you tell me what's going on? No pressure. Just whatever you feel comfortable saying. Ethan didn't speak at first. He stared at the floor. The toy car trembled in his hands. Chuck leaned down slightly, his voice steady as stone. It's all right, son. You don't have to be afraid anymore. They're here to help. Ethan looked up, his eyes searching Vega's face, searching for safety. Then just above a whisper, he hurt my mom. He said if I talked, he'd hurt her again. Silence. Sharp. Total. Vega's expression darkened subtly, but she stayed composed. Where is your mom now? She asked softly. At home. I think. She was crying when I left. Harris took one step forward. That's enough, he snapped, his voice cracking under the strain. Wrong move. Officer Ramirez stepped between Harris and Ethan immediately, placing a firm hand on his chest. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. Now. Harris raised both hands, feigning innocence. This is a joke. You're gonna believe a scared kid's fantasy over his own father? But you told the officers he was your son? Chuck cut in, rising to his full height. But Ethan never called you that. Ramirez turned. Is that true, sir? Harris hesitated too long. Chuck stepped forward, just enough to make Harris reconsider any sudden moves. This man isn't his father, Chuck said. And that kid wasn't lying. You could see it in his eyes. Ramirez's hand drifted toward his holster, not drawn, but ready. Vega stood slowly, placing a comforting hand on Ethan's back. We're going to take you someplace safe, okay? She said to the boy. Ethan nodded, clutching the toy car even tighter. Harris's jaw clenched. His whole act was falling apart in real time. This is outrageous, he growled. I demand to speak to... You'll have plenty of time to talk downtown, Ramirez interrupted, pulling out cuffs. Right now you're coming with us. Hands where I can see them. Harris backed up a step, but it was over. Chuck took one deliberate step forward, his voice like gravel and thunder. You messed with the wrong kid, and the wrong restaurant. As Ramirez moved in to cuff Harris, the man suddenly lunged, not toward the exit, toward Ethan. But Chuck was already moving. In one fluid motion, he stepped in front of Ethan and caught Harris mid-stride, pinning him to the ground with the smooth finality of someone who's done it 1,000 times before. You're done, Chuck muttered. Ramirez and Vega immediately took over, cuffing Harris and hauling him to his feet. You're under arrest, Ramirez said. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Harris didn't respond. His eyes were on Chuck, burning with hatred. Chuck didn't flinch. He just wrapped a protective arm around Ethan. X'd. McDonald's moments later, Ethan sat in the back of a patrol car, safe. Vega knelt beside him, handing him a small water bottle and a soft blanket. Ramirez gave Chuck a nod of appreciation. You did the right thing. Most people wouldn't have gotten involved. Most people aren't from Texas, Chuck said. And most people don't ignore a kid in trouble. He glanced through the window at Ethan, now talking softly with Vega. His grip on the toy car had loosened a little. The boy was finally starting to feel safe. We'll get him somewhere secure, Ramirez said. A Child Protective Services will be here soon, and we'll send a unit to the mother's residence. Check it out immediately. Chuck nodded. Make sure she gets the help she needs. Ramirez paused. You ever think about becoming a cop? Chuck smirked. I like what I do. One day, one kid at a time. The cruiser cut through the streets with sirens off, lights flashing silently in the fading afternoon sun. Officer Vega sat in the driver's seat, focused, Officer Ramirez beside her, flipping through the GPS on the dashboard. In the back seat, Chuck sat with Ethan, close, reassuring. Ethan's hands still gripped the broken toy car, his knees pulled up slightly, trying to make himself small. Chuck kept his voice low, calm and steady. Oh, we're almost there, Ethan. Just hang tight. You're doing great. The boy nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't crying, not yet, but his whole body spoke of tension he shouldn't have ever known. Next, Ethan's neighborhood. Moments later, the cruiser pulled up to a small single-story home. The front yard was still quiet. The porch light blinked faintly, even though it was still light out. One shutter hung loose against the side of the house. Chuck stepped out with Ethan, while Ramirez and Vega scanned the surroundings. Another patrol unit rolled up seconds later, followed by an ambulance. House looks closed up, Ramirez muttered. No sign of entry or movement. Ethan stepped forward, holding Chuck's hand tightly. The front door's always locked, he said. He had a key, but I don't. Chuck glanced at Ramirez, then back at Ethan. All right, I wasn't planning to knock anyway. But, Mace, with a simple nod from Ramirez, Chuck stepped onto the porch, gave one quick tap on the door just in case, then turned slightly, and bam, with a precise, powerful kick, the door burst open, the frame cracking but not splintering. The house was dark inside. Texas welcome, Chuck muttered as he stepped through. Int. Ethan's house. Moments later, the officers entered first, clearing each room quickly and methodically. Chuck stayed close to Ethan. The living room was small, disheveled. A lamp had been knocked over. A blanket lay half spilled off the couch, and a phone charger dangled unplugged from the wall. A back room, Ethan whispered, pointing. Vega moved ahead with Ramirez. Ma'am, this is the police. Can you hear me? No response. Then, back here, Ramirez called out. Chuck picked up Ethan gently and rushed in. In the back bedroom, a woman lay on the floor beside the bed, pale, motionless, a dark bruise on her temple. Vega was already kneeling beside her, checking vitals. She's breathing. Bed is there. The paramedics rushed in behind them. Chuck set Ethan down beside him. The boy stepped forward, tears finally falling. Mom, her eyelids fluttered slightly. The EMT worked quickly, gently lifting her onto a stretcher. Chuck rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder again, steadying him. She's going to be okay, kiddo. You got help to her just in time. Vega turned to Ethan with a small, hopeful smile. You were very brave. A lot of adults wouldn't have done what you just did. Ethan looked up at her, then at Chuck. I wasn't alone. Axed. Ethan's house later, the paramedics loaded Ethan's mother into the ambulance. She was conscious now, her eyes barely open, but she squeezed her son's hand when he leaned in close. I love you, sweet boy, she whispered. Chuck stepped back, watching silently as the ambulance doors closed. Vega approached, her tone low. She's stable. She'll be okay. They're taking her in for scans and observation. And the boy? Chuck asked. Ramirez answered from nearby. We'll call CPS, but he can ride with her for now. We'll make sure he stays close. Chuck looked down at Ethan, who held his toy car in one hand and had tucked the other into Chuck's. You've got good people around you now, Chuck said. The kind who don't let bad things slide. Ethan looked up at him with big, tired eyes. Will I see you again? Chuck hesitated, then gave the boy a soft smile. You bet, partner. Texas Rangers don't just ride off without checking back in. Int. Chuck's truck nightfall back in his truck. Chuck sat in silence for a moment, the glow of the streetlights catching the edge of his face. He stared at his phone, at the message he'd sent hours earlier to his emergency contact. A kid's safe. Mom found. Evil never wins. CN. He leaned back in the seat, letting out a slow breath. Then he turned the key. The community center was alive with laughter, music, and the smell of brisket wafting through the air. A small festival was underway, Families for Safety Day, sponsored by local law enforcement and community leaders. A banner waved gently in the wind, protecting each other because in Texas we never stand alone. Chuck stood near a booth, helping kids try out self-defense moves on padded dummies, teaching them how to stay safe, how to speak up. Ethan, now looking healthier, more confident, demonstrated a few of the moves he'd learned in the months since. The palm strike, sidestep, and yell no. Just like you taught me, Chuck. Chuck gave him a proud nod. That's right, partner. You're tougher than a boot in July. Fun. Nearby, Sarah stood with Officer Vega, laughing for the first time in a long while. Her bruises were long gone, but what remained was the fire in her eyes. Strength, healing, int. Small community hall later that evening inside, the crowd quieted as Officer Ramirez took the mic. And today we honor not just survival, but bravery. We honor a boy who spoke up when it mattered most, and the man who stood beside him when he did. He nodded toward the stage as Chuck and Ethan were called up. Ethan held tightly to a slightly worn but polished toy car, still his favorite. This car went through a lot, he said shyly into the mic, but Chuck helped me fix it. Just like he helped fix everything else. The crowd laughed softly, touched. Ethan handed Chuck a new drawing. This time it was the whole town, standing behind the boy and his mom. At the bottom it read, "You're never alone in Texas." X'd, Chuck's truck nightfall later. Chuck leaned against his truck, the sky a deep indigo overhead. Stars began to peek out. Sarah approached quietly. You changed our lives, Chuck. I'll never forget it. He tipped his hat. You did the hard part. All I did was kick in a door and stick around. Still, thank you. From a distance, Ethan waved. Bye, Chuck. Not goodbye, Chuck called back. Just see you later. He climbed into the truck and turned on the ignition. The radio played soft country as he pulled away down the dusty road. In Texas, heroes didn't ask for thanks. They just showed up, boots on the ground, heart wide open. Because real strength was standing up even when you're scared.